So we're on chapter 22, I believe.
That's what I have down.
What book?
We're
Joshua. We're just humming right along. Oh, and Charles, you didn't get the map. I apologize.
Okay,
It's
do you?
It's the fifth book right after Deuteronomy. It's a two-sided map, so that
Yeah.
sweet. You got it?
Yeah, Joshua chapter 24.
22.
22.
Anybody else want to turn to read?
Oh, no.
You're doing so great with those words.
Voice is scratchy today.
Oh, dear.
Just go for it.
Go for it.
Then Joshua summoned the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and said to them, "You have done all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded, and you have obeyed me in everything I commanded. For a long time now, to this very day, you have not deserted your brothers, but have carried out the mission the Lord your God gave you. Now that the Lord your God has given your brothers rest as he promised, return to your homes in the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. But be very careful to keep the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to obey his commands, to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and all your soul." Then Joshua blessed them and sent them away, and they went to their homes. To the half-tribe of Manasseh, Moses had given land in Bashan, and to the other half of the tribe, Joshua gave land on the west side of the Jordan with their brothers. When Joshua sent them home, he blessed them, saying, "Return to your homes with your great wealth, with large herds of livestock, with silver, gold, bronze, and iron, and a great quantity of clothing, and divide with your brothers the plunder from your enemies."
Okay, when you finish that first paragraph, I thought, boy, this sounds like something we might say in our church. Be vigilant in keeping the commandments and the revelation of Moses, the servant of God. Love God, your God. Walk in his ways. Do what he's commanded. Embrace him. Serve him with everything you are and have. You know, you'd almost think Jesus was saying that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is, when Jesus said, love your neighbor. And he gave the two great commandments. Remember when they were talking about the 10 commandments, and Jesus said, the first commandment is to love God with all your heart and all your soul. The second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And that really is a summation of what we have here. That, Joshua is saying to these people, love God, your God. Walk in his ways. Do what he's commanded. Embrace him and serve him with everything you are and have. Sounds almost Christian. Okay, back to verse 9.
So the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh left the Israelites at Shiloh in Canaan to return to Gilead, their own land, which they had acquired in accordance with the command of the Lord through Moses. When they came to Gilaloth, near the Jordan in the land of Canaan, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh built an imposing altar there by the Jordan. And when the Israelites heard that they had built the altar on the border of Canaan at Galiloth, near the Jordan on the Israelite side, the whole assembly of Israel gathered at Shiloh to go to war against them. So the Israelites sent Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, to the land of Gilead, to Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. With him they sent 10 of the chief men, one for each of the tribes of Israel, each the head of a family division among the Israelite clans. When they went to Gilead, to Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, they said to them, "The whole assembly of the Lord says, how could you break faith with the God of Israel like this? How could you turn away from the Lord and build yourselves an altar in rebellion against him now? Was not the sin of Peor enough for us? Up to this very day we have not cleansed ourselves from that sin, even though a plague fell on the community of the Lord. Are you now turning away from the Lord? If you rebel against the Lord today, tomorrow he will be angry with the whole community of Israel. If the land you possess is defiled, come over to the Lord's land, where the Lord's tabernacle stands, and share the land with us. But do not rebel against the Lord or against us by building an altar for yourselves, other than the altar of the Lord our God." When Achan, son of Zerah, acted unfaithfully regarding the devoted things, did not wrath come upon the whole community of Israel? He was not the only one who died for his sin. Then Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh replied to the heads of the clans of Israel, "The mighty one, God, the Lord, the mighty one, God, the Lord, he knows, and let Israel know. If this had been in rebellion or disobedience to the Lord, do not spare us this day. If we have built our own altar to turn away from the Lord and to offer burnt offerings and grain offerings, or to sacrifice fellowship offerings on it, may the Lord himself call us to account. No, we did it for fear that someday your descendants might say to ours, 'What do you have to do with the Lord, the God of Israel?' The Lord has made the Jordan a boundary between us, and you Reubenites and Gadites, you have no share in the Lord, so your descendants might cause ours to stop fearing the Lord. This is why we said, 'Let us get ready and build an altar,' but not for burnt offerings or sacrifices. On the contrary, it is to be a witness between us and you and the generations that follow, that we will worship the Lord at his sanctuary with our burnt offerings, sacrifices, and fellowship offerings. Then in the future your descendants will not be able to say to ours, 'You have no share in the Lord.'"
Well, let's pause there for just a minute. See, what's happened here is we have these 2.5 tribes. They build an altar. And of course, the altar is really in the tent of meeting. You know, that's where God is. So they build an altar. And what do the other people then say? That's phony stuff. You're not worshiping the God. And it reminds me of, what we have today in society. That there are people who think their altar, their worship, their building, that's where God is.
Yeah.
Anybody else got a church? You're worshiping a different God. And I've told you the story of a friend of mine, back in Michigan, whose brother-in-law was pastor of an evangelical church. And all of a sudden there were some people in that church who didn't agree with what he was preaching. And they said, he's not preaching God. So they went off and started another church. What do they say about the people who didn't leave? They're worshiping a false god.
Yeah.
So what we have here, and the Israelites had to face this several times. Synagogues started popping up, and the reason was when the Babylonians conquered Israel, and they took Jews to Babylonia. The Jews didn't change their faith. Now, their kids probably had a different take on it, but they were there and they could not go to temple. They could not go back to Jerusalem. So what do? They set up a little altar.
Sure.
Not for sacrifices, but to remember God. And so, you out of need, we had to have growth. And I think this, we're seeing here the beginning of that fracture, within the church, because, and I don't mean just the Christian church, but in all churches, all faiths, the real one is in Jerusalem. All the rest of them are fake. If you ask Roman Catholics, older Roman Catholics, where is the real cathedral? You know what they would say? Rome. And this is a cheap imitation, but the real work is in Rome.
Just a sec. The Sistine Chapel, is that in Rome, Italy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's actually attached to Saint, what's the cathedral, the big cathedral.
St. Peter?
St. Peter's, yeah. It's because when we toured St. Peter's, we started off. We went through the Vatican Museum, and then you go into the Sistine Chapel. You go through that, and then you come out and go into St. Peter's. But it's, a lot of churches. Remember, when we were growing up, if you had a friend who was Roman Catholic, they would never come to church with you. Because they were told that, well, people would think you can't find what you need here in the Roman church. So don't go to any church. Well, you kind of had friends that were Protestant and friends that were Roman Catholic. And sometimes those didn't mix real well. And I remember I dated a girl in high school who was Roman Catholic. But she had friends that went to the Roman Catholic high school. I never met any of those friends until we were in college, and then I ended up dating one of her friends. But you've got these structures that are artificially created, and we think it's a modern day problem, but it dates back to Joshua.
Mm-hmm.
These people, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and a half tribe of Manasseh, were not trying to create another church. They were simply creating an altar. And why an altar? Well, that's where sacrifices are made.
So is the real church up on 30th or down here on Hyde Park? Am I putting him in a corner there?
Real church is in Salt Lake City.
Oh dear.
The whole issue of altar and holy table. In my seminary, one of the graduating classes of my seminary, and it was long before I went there, because a couple of my professors were members of that graduating class. And they bought, every graduating class gives something to the seminary. And they bought a new altar. And it was beautiful. And the faculty voted not to accept it. Because an altar was Romish. They wanted a holy table. And they had to hire a carpenter to cut off the front of the altar and put two legs.
Oh dear.
And the faculty said, close enough. But, the early Anglican church did not have altars. They had holy tables. And, you bring an altar in, that's kind of Romish. And, we were Anglicans. So now the faculty, if they go out, they're faced with an altar. Almost every church, not many of them have holy tables. Some still do, but we're not one of them. And neither is the one over on 30th. They've got altars. So,
Did I understand that not all altars were used to worship God, but some altars were for recognizing your friend across the valley? There was no
This-
worship to him.
there was no sacrifice.
No sacrifice.
No sacrifice was done on those altars.
They just recognized each other.
They're saying, hey, we have the same God.
Uh-huh.
We have a place where, we need some kind of focal point. And for the Jews, there were only two, tent of meeting
Uh-huh.
and the Ark, the covenant. Well, this group didn't have either. So, they just set up an altar.
I noticed Sunday when churches weren't doing in person that Pastor Lisa was online here watching the service here.
Yeah,
That's nice.
I don't know what clergy got here on Sunday for.
Bill and Ted were here, and then there was no deacons. There was a couple people doing
The
the
projection,
video, the video thing.
Well, Pastor Lisa sent out an email to the congregation, the Emmanuel congregation, saying, we're not having church, but if you'd like to watch a church service, they're doing one at Grace Church. Here's the link. They're doing one at the Lutheran Church in maybe it was Lindsburg. Or it may have been McPherson, I'm not sure. But, that was also being broadcast. So, you can watch somebody else's. Okay.
I'm wondering why those three tribes were given land on the opposite side. Isn't that enemy territory? Or,
Okay, I get the map.
oh, here,
No, I got.
oh, okay.
This is in color.
Why didn't they get to go on the other side
Well, she has one.
of Jordan? I mean, I can see why they wanted to make sure they were approved.
When they were dividing up all the land, they somehow stayed on the east side of the Jordan.
Yeah,
And the question is why, or what's the background to that?
yeah.
Well, that was land that was conquered. That was part of the promised land.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
Oh, I thought they had to cross the Jordan to get the promised land. Okay.
And,
And they make the Reuben sandwiches over there.
yeah. And Gad also had another small section called Zooks. Gadzooks.
I'm glad you explained that. I didn't get that.
So you see where, it doesn't say exactly where they built that. It just says they built an altar. But Jerusalem was the center. That was where God was. And that was in Judah. And that was a long ways. I mean, you could see why somebody would say, come on, we can't all get to Jerusalem. Maybe we'd go once a year, but, we want to have some regular worship. And that's how cathedrals kind of came into being in the Anglican tradition and in the Roman Catholic tradition. Cathedral was a place that they did all the services. And so, when you had a small church, you weren't doing all the services, but the cathedral was doing it in your name. So, that was the place.
Where the
And
bishop resides
So,
in
yeah.
our tradition.
that the bishop is in the cathedral. And that was the central focus. So, when you have the Episcopal Diocese of Western Kansas, the cathedral's in Salina. That doesn't help anybody in liberal.
That's where the bishop was until Milliken came along, and then
Yeah.
he stayed here.
So, that's a long, long drive. Same thing if you're in Manasseh or Ephraim, Asher, Zebulun. To get down to Jerusalem, that was a long drive. And especially without cars,
Yeah.
and especially with nothing to drive. So,
No motorcycles or anything.
no motorcycles. Maybe a chariot. In fact, I'm not even sure they had chariots at this time.
Did they have camels? That's a serious question. Is that how they traveled? Was by camel?
Well, camel or walking.
Well, you don't think donkey,
Camels were the desert
women,
people.
Yeah,
Oh,
put your kids on the donkey or your wife on the donkey and you walk. That's why all the pictures that show Joseph going to Bethlehem shows Joseph walking, leading a donkey, and Mary on the donkey riding, which has got to be very uncomfortable for a woman who's with child.
yeah.
Well, back then, you see it in some modern westerns, is where the women ride side saddle.
Yeah,
And I'm thinking, because I don't know if they had some, but they'd have blankets that they would have put on there to help with chafing.
yeah. Well, she would have been on the side saddle. Right? Women always.
Yeah,
got
back then a
side.
lot of them did, I'd say.
But it's still, if you're pregnant, the donkey is bouncing. I mean, it's a wonder Jesus wasn't born before they got to Bethlehem. And it was probably a quick delivery once they got to Bethlehem. Okay, where do we get to?
I forgot it. I think somebody would remember.
26?
Okay, I'll do that. That is why we said, let us get ready and build an altar, but not for burnt offerings or sacrifices. On the contrary, it is to be a witness between us and you and the generations that follow, that we will worship the Lord at his sanctuary with our burnt offerings, sacrifices, and fellowship offerings. Then in the future your descendants will not be able to say to ours, you have no share in the Lord. And we said, if they ever say this to us or to our descendants, we will answer, look at the replica of the Lord's altar, which our fathers built, not for burnt offerings and sacrifices, but as a witness between us and you. Far be it from us to rebel against the Lord and turn away from him today by building an altar for burnt offerings, grain offerings, and sacrifices, other than the altar of the Lord our God that stands before his tabernacle. When Phinehas the priest and the leaders of the community, the heads of the clans of the Israelites, heard what Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh had to say, they were pleased. And Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, said to Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, today we know that the Lord is with us, because you have not acted unfaithfully toward the Lord in this matter. Now you have rescued the Israelites from the Lord's hand. Then Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, and the leaders returned to Canaan from their meeting with the Reubenites and Gadites in Gilead, and reported to the Israelites. They were glad to hear the report and praised God, and they talked no more about going to war against them to devastate the country where the Reubenites and the Gadites lived. And the Reubenites and the Gadites gave the altar this name, a witness between us that the Lord is God.
Okay,
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about that question, where it says that it wasn't for offering, it was to
Right.
recognize each other.
yeah, it was sort of a symbol.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about symbols? You get a new priest who went to the new rabbinical school, and he'd say, what the hell? We can burn an offering on here. I mean, that's how a lot of times things change. We're just going to put this up so that it shows that we're still hooked up with God. And somebody comes along and says, well, that's a long trip to the Jerusalem. Why don't we just do a sacrifice here? I mean, that's the way things change. Somebody says, hey, we've got an altar, we've got an animal to sacrifice. It's snowing and we can't get to Jerusalem. Why don't we just do it here?
You said the start of the synagogue,
Mhm.
they were going to temple. So you get into that, the younger generation thinking like that, maybe.
Well, when they couldn't get to Jerusalem because they were in Babylonia and they were captives,
Yeah.
somebody said let's have a place where we can meet and gather. And they probably started off as households, kind of like the early Christian church. They were household churches. And then as Christianity became accepted, they started building churches. And for the Jews, they started building synagogues. And somebody would be appointed rabbi. And, that structure then grew. Well, we're kind of seeing the beginning of that structure here, where they've got this altar that's built, and I really would think that sooner or later somebody's going to say, hey, what's the big deal? We'll just do a sacrifice here. We don't have to tell anyone else. And as soon as you do that, somebody tells someone else. And, if you're doing a sacrifice to the God Yahweh, and somebody complains, what? We can't make a sacrifice to our God Yahweh? It's like churches that say, well, we don't recognize them because, they don't baptize with full immersion.
Yeah.
And they say, well, that can't be a real church. A lot of times when we want to pick on a church, we find things that are unique to that church, and then we make them sins. And, you get some minister or somebody who just starts picking on them. I mean, I just think that it doesn't do anyone any good. I kid about the church in the bowling alley because I don't always remember Crossroads, but there are people who go there, and
A lot of people.
yeah, there's a lot of people, and I'm happy for them, and I would not say that that's not a church. It is, but it's not one that I would be attracted to. I mean, I worked with a friend who was a pin setter in a bowling alley when I grew up, and they're noisy and they're dangerous, but it's still a church. Let's get into 23.
After a long time had passed, and the Lord had given Israel rest from all their enemies around them, Joshua, by then old and well advanced in years, summoned all Israel, their elders, leaders, judges, and officials, and said to them, I am old and well advanced in years. You yourselves have seen everything the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. It was the Lord your God who fought for you. Remember how I have allotted as an inheritance for your tribes all the land of the nations that remain, the nations I conquered between the Jordan and the Great Sea in the west. The Lord your God himself will drive them out of your way. He will push them out before you, and you will take possession of their land as the Lord your God promised you. Be very strong. Be careful to obey all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, without turning aside to the right or to the left. Do not associate with those nations that remain among you. Do not invoke the names of their gods or swear by them. You must not serve them, or you must not serve them or bow down to them. But you are to hold fast to the Lord your God, as you have until now. The Lord has driven out before you great and powerful nations. To this day no one has been able to withstand you. One of you routs 1,000 because the Lord your God fights for you, just as he promised. So be very careful to love the Lord your God. But if you turn away and ally yourselves with the survivors of these nations that remain among you, and if you intermarry with them and associate with them, then you may be sure that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you. Instead, they will become snares and traps for you, whips on your backs and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from the good land which the Lord your God has given you. Now I am about to go the way of all the earth. You know with all your heart and soul that not one of all the good promises the Lord your God gave you has failed. Every promise has been fulfilled. Not one has failed. But just as every good promise of the Lord your God has come true, so the Lord will bring on you all the evil he has threatened, until he has destroyed you from this good land he has given you. If you violate the covenant of the Lord your God which he commanded you, and go and serve other gods, and bow down to them, the Lord's anger will burn against you, and you will quickly perish from the good land he has given you.
Okay. So this is Joshua's final warning to the people. You know, you've got to be careful, taking up with those other nations, because they might be able to sweet talk you into following their God. When I was in high school, one of the girls I dated was Roman Catholic. Now, my family dyed-in-the-wool Methodists. I was down visiting once and having dinner at an aunt's house, and my grandmother, I think it was, said, "What's your girlfriend's name?" And I said, "Catherine." And Grandma said, "How does she spell Catherine?" And I said, Kathryn. She said, "She's Roman Catholic." I said, "Yeah, how do you know?" That's the way they don't spell them, Kathrine. That's,
Over the sea or whatever.
yeah. And Grandma said, "How serious is this?" I said, "I'm in 11th grade, Grandma." But she said, "Well, no, don't you, because, you don't want to end up having to get married in the Catholic Church." I mean, that's southern Indiana. And, they kept the group separate. I went to high school with this girl. Even though she's Roman Catholic, she didn't go to the Catholic high school. Parents couldn't afford the tuition there. But, she was a nice girl, and it never really came up about, we never got into a big discussion about our religious beliefs. But there was that prejudice that was there. And we see it right here in Joshua. When Joshua says, "Be careful. You don't want to deal with those other people, because you're liable to end up worshiping the wrong God." And I think, for my family, and I don't think my family was unique at all. They were outspoken.
I remember Charlotte's family, one of her cousins or something, they were Lutheran, but Missouri Synod type Lutheran up in Great Bend area or somewhere, and married a Catholic, and boy, that was a real big deal. This is back in the 50s or 60s.
Oh, yeah.
That was a real big deal. But what you were talking about here a little earlier, I just my mind goes in weird ways. It occurred to me that the Pharisees were the original HOA people running around their clipboard and nitpicking all these little details. You know, they're measuring the grass and
Yeah.
measuring the fence you put up. And
How tall is the post office, or your post box?
yeah, you know, maybe the Pharisees were the originators of the.
It certainly sounds like
You
it.
know, people that just nitpick, just to nitpick.
Yes.
But, you know, I remember growing up, you know, remember, we were all alive when John Kennedy ran for president.
Oh, yeah.
And what was the big,
Or you're going to be answering to the Pope instead of the
Yeah.
Constitution.
yeah, I remember somebody saying, there's plans already to dig a tunnel between Washington, D.C. and the Vatican. I mean, it just sounds foolish, but there were people who were talking about that. I mean, hell, we had a hard time building a tunnel from Detroit to Windsor. But, you know, all of a sudden people get this, you know, in their mind. And, you know, I was old enough at that, I was probably junior in high school, that, you know, I didn't have that same kind of prejudice that my Terre Haute relatives had about Roman Catholics. I thought he was a decent guy. Now we learn more about him. I'm not sure how decent he was, but I think as a president he did a good job, and he certainly, nobody was embarrassed to have him as president.
No.
But there were a lot of people who said some really bad stuff about him when he was running, and you know, the first Roman Catholic, and I think, wasn't Nixon a member of the Quaker, wasn't he, friends? So I remember when Nixon ran against Kennedy, people would say, well, my God, one of them's Roman Catholic and the other one's a Quaker. What kind of choice is that for you?
I read a little bit about John F. Kennedy in his first year in office. And, he had the White House, and then he had another house in Florida, like Trump has.
Mm-hmm.
And the security guys, or this guy was writing the book, he said that he's able to get some notes from the security because the house was on the coast. There really wasn't any good way to protect some big frogmen or whatever
Right.
people on boats to come up and ambush the house. And he would always like to greet the crowd because he was taking a plane or a jet, whatever. And the security guards, some of them would follow him into the crowd, and some of them like, and it was funny because he was a hard guy to protect.
Yes. Yeah, he used to try to sneak out of the White House a lot.
Yeah.
Well, Harry Truman did too.
Oh,
I mean, Harry Truman used to try, you know, he liked to go for a walk at night. And he said, you know, if I'm going for a walk and I got 6 Secret Service agents with me, they're going to know who to shoot. So he said, if I go out on my own, people are not going to, you know, I'm just an old guy with a cane. And so, you know, he would try to sneak out.
Well,
But,
after the Kennedy assassination, they obviously
yeah, they tightened it up,
much changed
you know.
protocol.
So it really is, but you know, we see this kind of prejudice all the way back to Joshua. And, you know, Joshua is saying this for a good reason. They want to keep the purity of God's people. But, boy, look how it's been diluted.
When this would have been before Sadducees and Pharisees?
Yes.
But that there, at some point in time, will we kind of see where that they kind of evolved into the.
Yep. In fact, we'll talk about that a little bit when we start into the Pseudo-Figura. So, all right.
Well, I hope your appointment goes well.
Thank you. Chapter 24, and that'll be the end of Joshua.